Hi, welcome back to Waxing On. Monday, we're kicking off a new week, and this week it's Grateful Dead week. Yes, Grateful Dead, been around since 1965, they first formed up. I became aware of them probably in the early 70s. I knew who they were, I knew of Garcia. I was familiar with a couple of tunes, but at that point I didn't know it was their tunes until later on. Songs like Casey Jones, Truckin'. I knew I liked the music, but I really never got into buying any of their material in the early 70s. I was kind of leery. I was familiar with some of the San Francisco music with Big Brother and the Holding Company, and when Janis Joplin was with them, Jefferson Airplane. But for some reason, Grateful Dead struck me as, I didn't know if it was heavy metal. Apparently it was kind of psychedelic, but I really didn't understand what they did to go out and buy an album, even though I knew who they were. Now, I didn't know at that time, the kind of music they played, but I mean, they were crossing country, jazz, bluegrass, folk music, rock music, psychedelic music, world music. They've covered the bases on everything. And leader, unofficially the leader, Jerry Garcia, he was just a great musician. A lot of different albums out, a lot of different instruments he played, but he had a style that was uniquely his own. And it was probably early 70s, I'm going to say, no, 1987, late 80s that I first had a chance to hear them and know that I was listening to the Dead. Now, just to give you some idea or context here, back in 65 when they formed up, I just had a list of members, Garcia obviously, Bob Weir, Pigpen McKernan, Phil Lesh, and Bill Kreutzmann. Now, those names sound familiar because from 1965 pretty much to the end, very few personnel changes. Obviously, McKernan left when he passed away. Somebody else had to replace him. That's what Brent Mylan did. But the front line and the band really didn't change much since its original formation. Now, I said 1987, the first I really heard them. This has got a picture this time is when things like MTV music videos were all the rage. And the first video I saw that I recognized I was watching the Dead was Touch of Grey. And yeah, great tune. I love the performance. I love the tune. Went out and bought the album, In the Dark. And that's today's first album. My first Grateful Dead album, In the Dark. 12th studio album they put out, so they had quite a recording history by this time. Now, this one went double platinum. And this was the Dead's only top 10 album. They had a great following. They had great success, but they weren't getting a lot of airplay on the radio, obviously. And even songs like Casey Jones had some drug references in it, trucking, things like that. So not getting a lot of airplay, but a lot of people were aware of them. They had people following the record sales. But this album, first platinum album for the band, first turnaround, the really big success. Most of the songs had been played for a few years on their tours. They went into the studio and in 1 week recorded this album. I mean, that's unheard of. 1 week cranking it out. Now, let's just go over some of the tunes that are on here to let you know. We got Touch of Grey, and again, great tune. Hell in a Bucket, When Push Comes to Shove, West LA, Fade Away, Tons of Steel, Throwing Stones, and Black Muddy River. Now, a couple of guys were writing tunes, a couple of guys are featured on vocals on here. Now, majority of these tunes, again, we've got 4 of them written by Jerry Garcia and Robert Hunter. Now, at this time, I wasn't familiar with Robert Hunter's work, but I find myself, even with this album, gravitating towards the Jerry Garcia tunes, more so than the Bob Weir tunes. And Brent Mylan also covered one of his own tunes here with Tons of Steel. But we got Bob Weir, contributed 2 other tunes, and Mylan an extra tune. But the majority of the album, we're talking Garcia and Hunter, and to me, they defined the Grateful Dead sound. And I found even in the other years, I tend to gravitate more to the Garcia tunes. And Jerry Garcia's band, I like listening to them. I have to admit, I have not bought solo albums by Weir to really experience what he had to offer. Just something different. I realize they both contributed, but I just find I like Jerry and Robert's writing a little better in there. On this album, we had, of course, Jerry, Bob Weir, Brent Weiland playing keyboards on here. Pigpen's already passed away at this point. Obviously Phil Leach, Bill Kreutzmann, and Mickey Hart on drums and percussion. So pretty standard lineup on the album. Now, again, this was a studio album, and really the band became known more for their live albums. And we'll talk about them a little later on because we're going to save some live albums for the end of the week. But this album for me was really what turned me around. 1987, I went out. We're doing it on picture in picture because by this time I was not really buying albums. I have to admit it. But streaming wasn't available at this time either, but that's okay because I don't mind paying some money to make sure the artist makes some money on these. So I was downloading from iTunes. So these are all copies that I actually have on my devices. Great, because I was carrying them around everywhere, but I'll tell you, I bought a slew of Grateful Dead once it became available because now it was all there for me. Where I lived, I mean, really, there wasn't a lot of opportunity to buy their albums. The record stores in those days carried one or two, but that was maybe it, not the catalog that they had available. I go online now. I mean, streaming networks, there's a pile of stuff. There's so many live ones. There's the Dave's Picks, all of these concert tapes, but you can still go to iTunes. Some of these albums are still available there, and again, maybe a little more money going into the pocket of the musicians than there is on the streaming networks. I got something here from the other day, and I just want to read it to you, because I talked about this before, and I talked about it when we looked at streaming before, and this was a post. It's going to be a second because I'm pulling it up on my iPad here. And here it is. It said, did you know that just one CD sale or vinyl sale earns more income for an artist than 200 hours of streaming? One $20 to $25 album earns about the same money as royalties paid on 5,000 track streams. Come on. Buy the albums. Help the players out. Especially if you go to a live show and they've got material there to sell. They got albums to sell. Put that money in their pocket. The streaming networks really are not paying very much. I mean, goodness gracious, 20 hours of streaming to equal the money they can make off one sale. Come on, help them out. We all enjoy the music. We want them to continue. And I realize the streaming is a great way to make music accessible. I use it, but I use it to explore, find new people, find albums I like, and I often will go off and purchase that album, whether it's in a hard copy, whether it's on, I'm still using iTunes, guys, still doing that, or Bandcamp, or one of these other networks where I can buy the music and get the money in their pocket. So keep that in mind while you're looking. These albums and all the albums we look at this week, yeah, they are on the streaming networks. They're on iTunes. And I went on, I'm going to use Amazon for an example, but there's lots of places to buy music, and they are still available there. Vinyl copies, although those are getting a little expensive because vinyl's making a comeback. As you can see here, vinyl's what we're talking about a lot. Some of them are a little pricey. CDs are still available. If you can get a hard copy, as you've seen during the show, you get some great extras with a lot of those. So something to keep in mind. Anyways, today's album, In the Dark, Grateful Dead, my first Grateful Dead album, my first chance to really explore their music, and I'll tell you, it led to a lot of other purchases and a lot of other great music that we're going to talk about later this week. So join us for the Grateful Dead week. We'll be back on Wednesday with another excellent album. I'm going to say it's not really a breakout album because, you know, it's their fourth album. They'd already had a few out, but it's the one that kind of turned things around. Whole new sound, whole new future. See you on Wednesday. Till then, everybody take care. Stay safe. Thanks for stopping by.